All right, it's time for another episode of the Christian Reeve podcast.
Oh, I can't wait! Oh, but if you're watching on YouTube, make sure to like, share, and subscribe. It really helps us out.
Yeah, make sure you leave a review on Podchaser, because if you don't, I'm gonna find you.
Alright, mate, calm down. Don't get too excited, you know what I'm saying?
Absolutely. And also, make sure to leave a review on Spotify or Apple Podcasts.
Yes, and wherever else you happen to be listening to the Christian Reeve podcast.
Yes, and if you enjoyed the show, please make sure to share it with your friends. Spread the word.
Thank you so much for listening to the podcast. It means the world. Hope you enjoy it.
Hello and welcome to another episode of the Christian Reeve podcast. Today's guest is an award-winning animation director, animator, and all-rounder. His name is John Lumgair. Welcome to the show. How you doing?
I'm doing well. Thank you.
That's good to hear. Now, I'm going to do something a bit orthodox. Since we were having fun talking about job interviews before you were on camera, I'm going to ask you, what was your worst job interview ever?
So I'll give you two.
Oh, shit. Okay.
Because they're contrast. One was an interview where it was just clear that they'd given the job to someone else the whole time. So I was sat there and it was a formality, and it was clear that I'd wasted my time. So nothing particularly bad happened other than I'm like, why am I sat here? So that was one. The other one was one that went really, really, really well. So well that at the end of the interview, they were like, yeah, you've got the job. And I came out and I was excited. I was got on the train on my way home. And then they called me. And then they're like, well, we thought you were the best candidate. We couldn't imagine a better one. But then someone else walked in after you and we gave them the job.
What? Oh my God. I just, because I don't really go for job interviews anymore. Like I'm in the sort of same field as yourself where I'm chasing like acting and music and content creation and stuff. But and the few occasions that I have had interviews over the years, it's always been, more of the interviews actually came at the beginning of my, like, I don't know if you want to call it a business career. When I got out of university and I'd studied marketing and I was looking for jobs. And same as yourself, like, yeah, a lot of the time it's an interview as a formality, just to kind of get to know you. Like they've already pretty much decided. I mean, they say, don't they, in the first 20 seconds of meeting you, that's if you know then if you've got the job, really. I've heard some other messed up shit though. Apparently, a lot of places have no intention of hiring anyone outside. They've already made an internal hire, but for legal purposes, they have to advertise the job.
Yeah.
Which I've always wondered, what's the point? I don't understand that. I know it's a legal requirement, but why is that forced upon company? Like, company is a private institution, right? They can manage their business however they see fit, as long as it's within the law.
Yeah, exactly.
So why
it's a risk, right? If you're taking on someone you don't know, that's a risk. And if it's an internal person that you've known for years, then it's less risky. I mean, if they're opening it open because they want to see if there's any wild cards out there that might be better, but if they're just doing it for legal reasons, it seems dumb.
All right, it's only fair. I'll give you a couple of my bad interviews. One is really bad, and one is just annoyingly bad, but it gave a good lesson. So the first, I was about 18, 19, and I'm going for some sort of finance job. It was one of those like nepotism things where like a family member's friend or something arranged an interview for me at this company. And I'm like 18, 19, don't know really what this opportunity is. I've already got a job lined up elsewhere, but I begrudgingly went along. I'm a quite stubborn person. I've worked on that over the years, and I would say that I have a healthy relationship with it now. But back then, I was just stubborn. So, but I was strong in my conviction. So I knew if something was right for me or wasn't right for me. This was a finance job. It's in the middle of the city. I'm walking along. I'm not impressed by big, you know, grandiose business buildings. I'd seen them all a million times, grew up watching like The Apprentice and stuff. So I'm like, and like I did business school and stuff like that. So I'm like, I it doesn't impress me much. You know what I mean? It's just a building. You know, you can like put all the fancy shit in there, ping pong tables, everything, and it won't impress me. I don't care. Like, what are you going to pay me? What's the structure like here? Like, you know what I mean? Like, is this a place that I'm going to have a mental breakdown, or am I actually going to enjoy what I do? So walk in, you know, everyone's friendly, greeting, nice. It seems very nice. And then this person's showing me around, and my main takeaway is what this woman said. Walking along, everyone seems happy, and she's like, "It's a race to Friday here." But see, the way that she said it was as though her soul was slowly dying inside. And it was like when she said it, like normally I'd laugh at something like that, like, oh, whatever, a cringe business joke, right? But the way she said it, I was like, that's not something you should tell someone who's just walked through the door. Like, what? You know, I mean, don't lie, but that I don't know, be like, oh yeah, it's a great workspace. Everyone loves to be creative and work here, and you know, everyone's so passionate about the work. You know, like that's the sort of shit you say. Even if it's a lie, you just say it anyway. You know, I mean, you shouldn't lie, but you know what I mean. Like it's an advert for your company. That's what a job interview is, if you really think about it. That's what it is. It's like, why do you want to work here? Would you like to work here? This is what it's like to work here. You know, now we all know, like, once we get the job, it's a bit different. But for the most part, we want to have a good idea of like what it actually will be. So when people are just brutally honest like that, it's like, well, fuck, all right. And I remember going into this interview and just kind of sitting down, and I'd already decided I didn't want the job. And ironically, they offered me the job. And I was like, the whole time I was thinking, like, why did you offer me the job? I hate this. Oh, that's another thing. The job itself was awful. Oh my God. That was why I said no. So it would have been an admin assistant role for like a financial broker. And the way that they sold it to me was, see, that in of itself doesn't sound too bad, but then how they framed it was, you've got to run around chasing this person who is really elusive and very difficult to get hold of, and they will purposefully overspend on budgets, and you have to chase them for that constantly. Like, basically, like, they're just going to go out and spend like thousands and thousands of pounds on clients trying to woo them to do business with the company, and I would have to run around going, can you sign this invoice, please? Like, that would be my job. And a lot of people, when I turned that job down, they said I was an idiot, and they said, well, you know, you're turning down a real opportunity here, Christian, you know. And I was like, this does not sound like an opportunity I would want. But I don't know. See, you never know.
Some people can turn that stuff around. They will thrive in that environment. But if you're not going to thrive in it, you'll hate it and you'll quit anyway.
The second one, because you gave two, so I'll give two. This is truly dreadful. And I think that these interviews still go on to this day, and they're not really interviews exactly. A lot of the time they'll take the form of, like, I've had this before, where you think you're going for an interview and actually you're going for a meeting with like a recruitment coordinator to assess if you're suitable for a job interview, which really pisses me off because, look, you know, I grew up in London and travel is expensive.
It is.
You know, most of us are poor and we live in like the suburbs. So getting a train into London is a lot of money. You know, especially back when I was at uni, finishing uni, and I'm on like minimum wage, and I'm like, what we're doing with my life. It was kind of like, oh, do I go for this job interview or do I eat this week? Like, it was kind of like that. And I remember, like, so that happened a few times, but there was one particular instance where we show up, and it was like a assessment day / interview. The interview came right at the end, after like 3-4 hours of just being in a room, like several rooms with people that you know you're competing against. So it's kind of like The Apprentice, but like you're actually having to work together. and I've never had any qualms about that, but I'm like, this is deeply awkward because,
Mm.
and no one tried to like, you know, win one over on someone else. No one tried that, fortunately, but it was just uncomfortable. It's a bit like when you're sitting there, waiting to be called in, and there's that long line, and you're just another number, and it's like you kind of like, really, if you're promised a one-on-one interview, you should not see the other candidate unless they've just walked out. Like, really, I think that's better. If you can absolutely avoid it, conceal it, that's how you should do it. You shouldn't just have everyone huddled in a lobby,
Yeah, I learned that from experience because we were auditioning for a part, and we described what the kind of the woman and what her role would be in the film, and so they were all sat together waiting, and they all looked very similar. And I remember thinking, we didn't do it deliberately, but afterwards we were like, we are never doing that again. That was unintentionally cruel, and so we're like, no, never again.
That's pretty standard in the acting world, though, isn't it? Like, when you get called in for auditions. I mean, I always look at it like just go in there, forget everyone else around you, and just do your thing. Even
Mm.
if you feel like now your thing is shit because you've just seen that guy go in and he absolutely just killed it. At the end of the day, I think it Bryan Cranston that said it, maybe. I mean, Bryan Cranston's got a lot of wisdom. For anyone who's a budding actor, listen to him. He has a lot to say, and it's very useful. I'm paraphrasing what he said, but basically, it's kind of like you prepare something that's like the best representation of what you can do. It's like you go in there with an idea. Here's your idea. This is my idea for the part. If they don't like it, that's fine. At the end of the day, they have a very specific thing that they're looking for. And a lot of it often comes down to just look, which is ridiculous a lot of the time, because I think that so much of acting is more about, usage of the body and the voice and tone and using your intuition. A lot of different things, come together for an actor to create this character, but, at the same time, you're on screen and it's about what can be done with your look. Some people have very rigid kind of like specific looks that you can't get around, like you can't change it. But then you get someone like, say, I don't know, Jared Leto, who is like, sometimes you don't even recognize him. It's kind of amazing. That's what I aspire to be like with my acting, is to be like a chameleon actor where I could sort of jump into different roles and pull it off, but convincingly. So it's not just like, oh, this guy's got different makeup, but isn't he this character? And you're like, no, that's still that guy. Like, for instance, I love Ewan McGregor. I think he's brilliant. I've just seen some posters for A Gentleman in Moscow, and I'm just like thinking, that's fucking Obi-Wan Kenobi in makeup and like a funny wig, Well, I'm doing my boy that. He's done some very good movies. Trainspotting's up there. But you know what I'm saying? Like, sometimes you look at an actor and they're dressed up in a role, and you're like, yeah, that works. Other times you look at it and it's like they're just playing dress up.
Yeah, but I think I usually cast voices rather than actors that I'm interested in what they look like. And one of the things I'm looking for is contrast. So if I've already cast somebody that sounds a particular way, their voice is high pitched or their voice is low or whatever, I'm looking for someone that doesn't have that as the other person. So there's more contrast, there's more richness. Then no one's going to get confused. Like it's just, and so when you're auditioning, the director might have in their head, well, this person is brilliant, but they're in the same visual or auditory genre, if you like, of the other person, and so they're not going to be suitable.
Do you know, it's interesting you say that, because I do voice acting as well, and I send out like a bazillion self-tapes every week, right? And a lot of the time it will come with a full script, and I'll do exactly that. High voice, low voice, high voice, low voice. And a lot of it is you're only actually auditioning for one part, but then I've had a few instances where they're like, oh, we really liked that second voice you did, actually. Could we use that with a different character? Or like, if nothing else, it just shows that you can do two voices. So it's kind of cheating, but it's kind of
Oh,
useful.
it's really useful. So there was a lady that I was listening to her reel yesterday. It's for a very particular thing, but there were because I could hear that she could do like five or six really good different voices. I'm like, this person's a good person to have. If she was on board, then any bit parts along the way we could potentially use her. So the versatility is so useful.
As a director, like or casting director, what advice would you give to voice actors? Because obviously people are sending stuff out every single day. You're going through like a million different reels every day. What are you looking for? What are some kind of like not to do's? Walk us through that.
Um, so I would some of them have music at the beginning, and it's just like, no, I want to hear the voice straight away. If I'm listening to lots and lots of different ones, I want to go straight into the voice. I want clear labeling, and actually, the the meta information that goes with it is really significant because I was looking for something very, very specific, and I could not find it, and I find so presumably you just speak English, right? Is your
Yeah, I can do. I speak a little bit of Estonian from the time that I lived there, but yeah, mostly just English. A few other words
because
and phrases in other languages.
I find that there are people that might be bilingual
Right.
and they'll do their English one and their Spanish one or their Estonian one or whatever. But actually, what I'm often looking for or what I'm interested in sometimes is English, but with an Estonian accent and or
Mm.
English. And so I might not want the Estonian voice, but I don't always want the Queen's English or the King's English or whatever. I'm wanting something different. And actually, difference is a really good thing. So you hear if something sounds different, you'll be like, oh, I'll bookmark that, have a listen to that again. Because you end up with lots and lots of people. They just sound they're doing kind of the same thing. And that becomes just, oh yeah, another one that sounds like that.
I will say there's a big difference between someone who's mastered a particular accent versus someone who is trying to do this particular accent.
Mm,
Like I never put myself forward for anything that I don't feel I've got a strong enough grip with. Like I might be able to
yeah.
do, for instance, some semblance of like a Welsh accent, for example, but not well enough that I'm willing to commit to it for a full role.
Yes.
Whereas like American accents, I do that all the time. I've done a lot of like Southern drawl or like Midwest, something like that. But I feel confident with it. But every now and again, it catches you. So you're always working on it. You know what I mean? Like there'll be certain
Mm,
words that throw you off, and you have to really study that constantly. I think a lot of people think they can just wing it, like, oh, it's easy to do an American accent. And for the most part, I think for English British speakers, it is, but at the same time, to make it convincing so that it doesn't sound like an English guy doing an American accent, you really have to study it a lot. Like a
mm.
lot of, I saw this the other day. It was what's his name from The Walking Dead? Who plays Rick? Andrew Lincoln. So there was, I remember seeing in the comment section somewhere that they said this was like American fans. They were reflecting on the fact that his accent in the very beginning seasons was very much that. It was a good accent, but it wasn't as convincing as 3, 4 seasons down the line where he's clearly fully integrated. But then let's look at that. The actor Andrew Lincoln is living in that area for most of the year. He's
Mm.
around it constantly. He's constantly using that accent to the extent that when he is speaking with his English accent, you can still hear the American twang in it because he spends so much time using that accent. And
That's
I'm okay. I don't know, maybe that's like full immersion. That's a bit over the top, but that illustrates my point about like the usage of really just practicing, practicing, practicing.
Brits seem to be better at American accents than Americans are at British accents. But that I don't know if that's just because I'm British and so I hear it more, or or um or it
It's
really is that they're not as good.
From what I understand, it's based on the media that we consume. So I don't know if you've seen. There's a famous interview with Christian Bale where he's been asked about this, and his reflection was that like Americans only ever hear like classic British accents, so like Mary Poppins or something like that.
Mm,
And how do they speak? Well, they speak like it's the 18th, well, 19th century, and no one speaks like that anymore in England. So, and there's not many shows that get exported from England over to America where you get a clear understanding of how English people speak. Sometimes you
mm,
get a show that's like retooled for over there and it hits or it misses, but like, do you know what I mean? Like,
mm,
we have so many American shows that have crossed over to England and have become successful. You know, Friends, How I Met Your Mother. I'm just using examples of like
mm.
sitcoms, but like, there's the proliferation of American media and film and TV across the board, like from movies to TV shows to everything else, reality TV. We've got so much data to use and go for. We hear it all the time.
Yeah,
So of
yeah, we
course
do.
we can master it. It's not that we have this amazing power, like we're just these amazing wordsmiths that we can just pull it off. It's just we have more information,
Mm.
you know.
So
And
I was interested in Daniel Craig in the Glass something. I can't remember the detective thing he was recently, and he played a southern like a southern detective,
mm,
a Southern American detective, and I was to me he sounded totally like he'd nailed it.
yeah.
But I wonder if I was with an American from the South, they'd be like, "Oh, that's so off."
Well, I mean, yeah, sometimes. Like I felt the same way about Andrew Lincoln in the beginning of The Walking Dead. I thought he nailed it, but then I guess if you're from that area, you're going to hear slight things that are off. Like a lot of the time, I notice it. Like when I'm listening back to my own stuff, sometimes I'll notice little twangs here and there. I'm like, right, I need to work on that. I need to work on
Mm,
this. Like but you have to like. It's not something that would immediately be able to be caught. I think it's only when there's extended dialogue over time, and you're like, oh, okay, I can hear it here. Oh, I caught it here, etc. It's
mm,
you. I think you have to be looking out for it, you know. And of course, if it's an American who's kind of interested in this English actor, oh, well, wow, they spent time learning the accent. That's cool. Like they're going to be listening, actively listening for it, I guess.
mm.
You know, so it's interesting. That was quite a tangent. I appreciate it. Is there any other advice you could give budding voice actors? Anything else that you look for? Anything that I don't know, that excites you?
One thing is just make sure you've got. It's obvious, but audio reels. The amount of times
Yeah.
I'd be connected with somebody and I'd be like, they say they're a voice actor. I'm like, well, where's your voice? I want to hear it. I,
Brilliant.
it's
That line
really,
right there is perfect. You're a voice actor. Where's your voice?
it's, and then you'll get like a standard video show reel, which is better than nothing. But I'm interested in the voice. That's all I want to hear. Like, give it to me.
I'm going to circle back to that job interview story only because I hate it when you're listening to a show and they just say, "Oh, we're going to get back to that," and they never get back to it.
Mm,
So I'm going to make a point of getting back to it, and then we get back on with our creative conversation. Because I try to do that with my show. I try to have like segments if I can, like
yeah,
judge
yeah.
it. You know, it's not like set in stone though, but it's kind of like I always imagine it as like a kind of like a casual show that actually has a lot of research and planning involved. But to the viewer and the listener, it just feels like we're just sitting down having a casual conversation. But
Nice.
it's a very well planned casual conversation. In theory, I don't know. In my head, it works that way. Right. So this job interview, let's get it out of the way. So
Mm,
basically, turn up to this office, and there's like 50 of us in a room sitting in rows of chairs with a guy with a projector at the front. And as I mentioned earlier, it was an assessment day type deal. So it was a mixture of being in that room and being, you know, they're trying to sell us on what the place would be like. I believe we got shown around at one point, and it looked more like I mean, it was like this was the beginning of everyone loves open plan offices trend. So it's all like, oh, this is great integration, or we're all having a coffee in this open space and being creative. It's wonderful. And I'm like, this is my idea of hell. I need my own space. Leave me alone. Yeah, I remember that moving from one office to another years ago. I went from having my own desk to being like rammed in with like four other people, and I'm like, this is just not good for human beings. You know,
Mhm.
it's great to be in a space where you can work with other people, but to be shoved into each other's personal space is never a good thing.
I agree.
Anyway, the bit I want to get to is like the assessments were fine, you know, the talks were fine. We had the interview at the end. I knew from that I probably hadn't got it. I was really trying, you know, I was fresh out of uni. I felt like I knew something about marketing. Didn't realize till later that I'd had a lot to learn about marketing, and actually uni had not prepared me for it at all.
Yeah.
I didn't even know what social media management was or Google Analytics. I didn't even know what a copywriter was. And I was a marketing graduate. Think about that for a second. um, so we get into the room, and what they start doing is sending people out of the room. So more people, more people, more people. And we kind of clock what's going on. So basically, people get sent out. They're going to presumably job interview rooms to be interviewed again, probably to confirm, get their offers. There's 8 of us left in the room. I never forget this as long as I live. The guy at the front of the room is kind of standing there. He turns and he claps and he goes, right, guys, it's bad news. It's a classic salesman. Every one of you sitting here has been unsuccessful today. And we're all like sitting there like, oh. Like there's that you can feel the energy just seep out of the room. We're all just like, after all of that. And like, why would you keep us here to do that? Like, that's the other
Yeah.
thing. Like,
Yeah.
if we didn't get it, just send me home, man. I don't know, give me a goodie bag and send me on my way. But he proceeded to do this whole 15-minute speech about like, you know, opportunities and not giving up and just keep going. Da, 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 da. It's like, look, I want a job, man. I'm fresh out of uni. I'm poor. I'm still working at a bar. Like, I need money. I need a job. I don't need Field of Dreams speech. Like, just leave me the fuck alone.
Exactly. Yeah.
Just, oh my God. And I really feel for anyone that's still interviewing for these types of jobs. Obviously, the market's changed a little bit in so much as that we've got like hybrid options now and you can do online interviews and stuff like that. But you still get it every once in a while. Like, for instance, I do hospitality to pay the bills because of the flexibility. So it's not my career, but it enables me to be able to do acting and music and everything and be available at a moment's notice. It's great.
Yeah.
And I was, you know, hedging my bets, trying to apply for different agencies just to kind of maximize work potential. And one place I interviewed for, I applied to had, I don't know how many pages of like things that they required, and that put me off first of all. And secondly, there was an interview, and apparently what the interview was, I didn't go, but I got told about it. You had to be in a room and basically show that you could carry a plate, walk confidently across a room with said plate. And it's like really basic stuff that you don't need to be taught. Like, unless there's like a particular trick or something, I suppose, but you can learn that really quickly. You know, like most of all of the training, I use that word loosely, that I've ever had in hospitality has been, or any job actually, has been on the job.
Yeah.
Like, it's just, you know, but I guess that's fine. Maybe I'm being hypercritical, but it's like, I always look at it like, don't waste my time. Like, recruitment coordinators are the worst for this. Like, don't lead people into thinking this is an actual job interview opportunity. Like, why do you need to interview me to assess whether or not I'm good enough to interview? Like, this could be an email. This could be a quick video exchange.
Yeah.
You know, just painful, absolute pain.
Actually, it did remind me of I went to a kind of interview thing at a McDonald's, um, years and years ago, and it was packed. I was expecting it to be in the whole room was just packed with hundreds of people. And the guy stood up on a table and he said, unless you're prepared to make this your life, then I suggest you leave now because this is like, and he was talking about it as if working for McDonald's was the greatest meaning in life. And at this point, I just looked at the crowd. I thought, this isn't what I'm wanting to do. This was literally what I just wanted. I wanted some money, and I thought if anyone's like stirred by his speech, they'll get the job, and I won't. So I just left, and that was just 5 minutes. So it doesn't really count as an interview. I mean, I never actually interacted with another person.
No, but it's an important point. I mean, the amount of times I've spoken to people at jobs and they're clearly very passionate about what they do. Like I met people that are really passionate about
Mm,
hospitality, and I'm like, good for you. And like, I'm never going to love it the way that you do, but I know what it means to have passion in what you do.
yeah,
I am so passionate about acting and music, filmmaking, creative things, podcasting. Like, I want to give it my absolute best every time because I believe in this. I believe in what I'm doing. I believe in the process. Why give anything less than your absolute best? You
mm,
know,
yeah,
if there's always going to be people that show up that are just there to work, and that's fine. You don't have to love it. Like you going into that job and going, okay, I just need money. That's fine. That's perfectly acceptable, in my opinion. Where it's not acceptable is when you walk in, you're like, oh, fuck this place, or whatever. I don't give a shit about it. Like, why should I
yeah,
try? Da-da-da. A lot of people seem to have that attitude. And it's like, yeah, it might not be your dream in life, but for other people, it is. Have some respect, not just for them and for the place, but for yourself as well. Like, I think someone said this to me the other day, and I couldn't unthink this. Like, I think it is spot on. If you're giving 100% in something that you love, but then you're also giving 0% in another area of your life, there's going to be a disconnect there. It's going
yeah,
to seep into it. Like, whenever I go out and do hospitality stuff, listen, I hate it. A lot of the time, it's long hours. I get abused by managers or customers, or I'm just exhausted, or I'm like mentally checked out. I feel disrespected. I feel demeaned. I'm questioning my life choices, and I'm like looking at it like, damn, man, I hope something works out creatively, or I'm just gonna break down at this point.
mm,
But I give it my best. I try my
yeah.
best, and I think that's a reflection of you and everything that you have to offer. Like if you see me out somewhere and I'm doing hospitality, I will be giving it my best.
That's the right attitude because you'll you'll feel better as a result. The people that are um the recipients of the hospitality, they've paid money for whatever the event is. Everyone, it just creates everything better. If someone's got like a negative attitude, it does just seep into everything. So I always think everything you do, you should give it your all. Um,
You learn so much through it, don't you? Though, and you meet amazing
mm,
people. Like I can't count how many times I've been working somewhere and I've ended up talking to someone, and now we're working on a creative project together.
yeah,
And
yeah,
I think about that a lot. Like it's an opportunity. Like I use it as advertising sometimes. That I just people will be talking and they'll be like, "Oh yeah, I do this, and this." No, I don't like immediately announce it, but when people ask like, "Oh, what do you do outside of here?" and then I say all these things, and they're like, "Oh, okay,"
mm,
because they assume like this is just what you do, and it's like, no, 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 I'm pursuing these things. And then they're intrigued, and then you can advertise yourself a little. Or sometimes customers will do that. They'll start talking to me, and I'm just like happy to talk because that's just all I do. And then it's like you can get yourself over that way. And it's like I think as long as it's done in the right way, like don't have any ego, don't pretend like you're God's gift to the world or something. Just be real, be you, and just be like, yeah, I'm working on this. Maybe you'd be interested. Maybe you want to work together. I don't know.
mm,
Something.
yeah. I
Let's
totally agree.
let's talk more about you because we've been going back and forth It's been fun, man. I appreciate the conversation. Thank you. But I want to talk more about you because you are
Mhm.
my guest and it's important. How did you get into animation and directing? Where does that journey start for you?
Uh, it starts when I'm a child. So
Damn. All right. Early.
I I loved watching TV and films, mainly TV. I just loved watching cartoons, and I could have watched them all day if they actually showed them all day. And I made flick books. I wanted to tell stories. I was just fascinated by the process, how this drawing could be alive in front of me and it could live and breathe and have hammers hit over its head and all of that stuff. And that excited me. So like, yeah, that's what I want to do. But I've got no idea how you do it. So um, I started trying to figure out that. Um, and I was good at artistic subjects at school, so that helped, and not maybe good at the others. um, then I went to study animation at university, and as you were saying about your marketing course, that you can study something and then not really learn what you need to learn. Um, and
Well, they're
but I
just trying to
met
sell you shit. Do you know what I mean? Like the
it,
universities. Just on a real quick side note here, they're just trying to sell you on the masters and the PhD. So you're learning theory based stuff, and in a lot of instances, maybe it's practical stuff you can use, but in a lot of instances, it's not. It's just theory, and it's like, well, this how's this how can help me get a job? And they probably won't.
yeah, yeah, it feels like a big sham, the whole thing.
It is. What?
And 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 a mixture of the students and the taxpayer end up having to foot the bill for something that isn't really fit for purpose. But anyway, I don't want to complain about that. Met some good friends there. Um, we started doing projects together, and then after uni, same similar experience to you. I was just trying to get anything that would pay me. Went to lots of interviews and um, worked worked as a security guard for a while.
Oh wow.
Um,
What was that like?
um, that was all right. I'm clearly better at night or later shifts than earlier shifts. I'm definitely a night person. Um, it was so I was doing it at the Royal Courts of Justice, and at
Wow.
that time the Hutton report had come out. So the government was on trial because of um there was there was a death of a journalist. Oh no, was it a death of somebody? And the government was kind of implicated in it, and
Oof.
it was all a bit odd. But anyway, the that case was happening at the court while I was there, so that was quite fun. It's funny how your brain filters out all the bad stuff and you just remember the good stuff because it was. I remember it used to be in this beautiful building, but like loud noise of just people shouting and that just being like a horrible beginning of the day as people were coming into the building. But that's kind of filtered out, and I just have romanticized all the good stuff now.
That's good.
Um, but I, yeah, did all sorts of different things. Was doing little bits of freelance animation during this whole period, and then a few of us were like, right, we've got to take this seriously. We've got to go for it. So we formed a company together and we pitched on some projects, got some projects in, and that was really fun. And we felt like we were really off the starting blocks. And then all the work dried up, and we didn't really know what to do, and realized that we were, um, yeah, completely amateurs when it came to business. And so we had to figure stuff out and slowly built up getting more and more work in. So we weren't just doing animation, but live action as well. So the other the other two guys were live action guys. So that was one of them's my brother, and one of them's a guy that I don't work with anymore, although recently did some work with him. So that was fun. Um, yeah, so that was how we progressed. Um,
It's interesting listening to you here, like talk about that journey, and especially the end there where you're saying like, the work dried up, and then it's like a challenge. Like I can really relate to that right now in my life. I'm trying a lot of different things.
Mm,
I remember telling a friend about this the other day. She's an events promoter, and she's reflecting on her first show and how well it went. And I was there, I was supporting her, and I thought it was absolutely fantastic. But I also, when you're clapping for your friends and their successes, you can't help but reflect on your lack thereof in your own life. And
mm,
I look at that, and we were reflecting on everything I'm doing. And she was like, I don't get why it's not happening. And I was like, well, I think a lot of the time it can be right place, right time, or knowing the right people, or people taking a chance on you.
yeah,
All you really can do is just like line everything up, do your best, and hope that something reaches people, takes off in some way. But that's the thing, isn't it? You're giving yourself a chance, an opportunity. Like whenever I do this show now, I approach it with zero expectation, which crushes my heart because I pour my heart, my soul into it.
mm,
But at the same time, like, gosh, it's been like how many episodes? 263, I think, now, over 4 years. I've interviewed people all around the world, various industries, different jobs, different backgrounds, different stories. And I meet amazing people. I hear their stories. I hear how they made themselves successes. And I wonder, where is mine? Is it going to happen? Is it ever going to happen? I don't know. I won't sit and pity myself either. I think that's a bad move. But it's like I said to my housemate the other day, like I approached it always from like a pragmatic perspective.
mm,
What can I do differently? What can I change? How can I learn? What can I do to make sure that I have a chance of success? And the reality is, I think a lot of the time, if you're trying everything that you can do, just got to be patient.
yeah, yeah. There's a guy, Rory Sutherland, who's a ad executive, Ogilvy. Well, kind of, he can do what he likes. I mean, he's very bright, very interesting, and he talks about just increasing your surface area because you don't know where you're going to get lucky.
Mm.
And so it's, I've got no idea. Like people ask, where does work come from? I don't know. Like you get you get jobs through someone sees something you did for someone else and you don't even know how they saw it. They don't know how they saw it, but they did. And then they get in contact, you do some work. Lots of it's word of mouth and people recommending, but you don't really know exactly why you got something and didn't get something else. You you can be smart and rationalize stuff. You don't quite know. It's all a little bit more random than I think people make out.
It fascinates me as well, like how much of it is word of mouth still. I mean, of
Yeah.
course, you've got online, you got people contacting you from around the world in that sense, but it's still that. It's like, it makes sense as well. Like, okay, let's take your company as an example. At the end of the day, when people are reaching out to you, they're looking for something very specific in mind that they have. They see your work and they're like, right, can we trust them? Can we take a chance on them? And then
Mm,
if someone's already worked with you and it went well for them, of course they're going to recommend you, be like, yeah, you should work with them, and this is why. And of course that'll set you up. I've
yeah.
had that a lot with acting. That's been how I've gotten certain roles. Has been like, oh, I work with him on this. You should use him, and boom, that's how you get it.
Yeah.
Um, Same with things like music recommendations, friends saying, putting in a good word, like. So I look at it very differently now. Like for all the time and effort I'm putting into like trying to make stuff happen, I do pay a lot of attention to just talking to people. Like just you know what I
Yeah.
mean? Like just talking seems
Yeah.
to help.
Because we're relational. We're
Sure.
not, and I feel like the internet has become very, it's disconnected humans. It's supposed to be this great connection tool, but actually it's a disconnection tool in so many ways that people are behind an avatar, even if it's a very realistic one. But it's where we are actually in conversation with real people and connect at them as another human being that's where we build trust, because it's hard to build trust with someone, I don't know, where it's just a LinkedIn profile or whatever. It's not. It just doesn't have the same thing.
No, you're right. And actually, it's interesting you mentioned LinkedIn because I get a lot of offers on there for different things, and they irritate me because they're devoid of exactly what you said, that kind of human relation
Mm,
level of trust. It's always just someone jumping into your they paid to get an instant message, and they're just like, "Hey, Christian, would you be interested in XYZ sales thing?" And I'm like, "No." Like this pitch is just like, why would I want this sales thing shoved into my inbox that I didn't ask for? Number one, so don't do that. Number two, when it is a real person and they're reaching out, it almost always is immediately like a, hey, would you like this paid service? And it's like, have you looked at what I'm doing? Have you spent like, okay, let's say someone's reaching out about my podcast and they want to help me grow it or something, like, get an
mm.
audience. Okay, well, let's look at that then. How many episodes have you listened to? Like, do you know if I have monetized this or not? Like, do you know what the reach is? And in your pitch, what exactly are you going to do to help me achieve that goal? If it's just pay me this and I'll get you loads of views and listens, no, I'm not an idiot. Like, what do you think this
Yeah,
is? 2005 internet and you're buying likes? Like, no, it's not how it works.
buying bots.
Yeah, you know what I mean. Like, oh, MySpace
It
does,
really
yeah.
is.
But nothing. There's a lot of it hasn't changed. I get a lot of those scam emails in my inbox on my Gmail, and I'm just like, what is this? Like, I'm not going to pay for this. Or sometimes it is actually a legit person, but their just pitch is just all off because all people seem to give a shit about is the numbers. Like, oh, I can get you this many listens. I can get you this many listens, and it's like, you know what matters more than how many fucking listens you've got? Pardon my language. Passionate about this. Is like how you can retain that over time.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? Like, okay, this one person has been following the show for several years and is a regular listener of this and really invested in this.
Mm,
That is infinitely more valuable than 1,000 people that occasionally might drop in and probably aren't really that interested.
yeah.
You know,
Yeah. I think that you're absolutely right. And that's with all areas of business
sure.
is you want the real and that's why face to face always ends up winning out. And yeah, I think everything's like in a hierarchy because I think you've got face to face in the room, really being able to look at people and engage with them. And then you've got this kind of thing, which is the next tier down because it's actually a real conversation. But it's mediated through technology, but it's still real. And then you've got it all the way down to just instant message type thing where you don't even know if you're talking to a bot or an AI kind of thing.
You most likely are. I mean, I don't know. I'm so sick and tired of AI, to be honest. I don't think it's a positive. I was talking to a guy. This is what I meant about the conversations thing. So I'm
Mm,
working kiosks at the AO Arena in Manchester, and there's a guy there who is studying philosophy at university, and he's
mm,
doing his dissertation on the ethics of AI. And I'm like, that is fascinating. So I just want to quiz this guy for half an hour. And because I've done a lot of shows on AI, I've been on other people's shows, I've done it on my Patreon, patreon.com/Christian Reeve. Um, and not a good thing for us creatives, to be honest. Seems like everyone's like, oh, let's just use AI instead. I'm like, why the fuck would you want to do that? I mean, it's interesting that you can get something quick for free and get like a mock-up. That's cool. But then it's not original. It's taking ideas from other things and putting them together. Like it's like, oh, I've created this new art piece. It's a mixture of Picasso and I don't know, Matisse and whoever else.
yeah.
And it's like, okay, but it's not original then, isn't it? It's like a Frankenstein of all these different parts that
Yeah, it's a
are
frank because actually creativity is combining pre-existing things, but it's not a Frankenstein. It
yeah.
goes into you and then it percolates and then inspiration comes and it comes out of a combination of random stuff, but you don't even know what it is. It's just
It's like there's this short film I'm working on at the moment, right? And we have a lot of different influences as far as like what's influencing the film. And there was a danger that it was getting too similar to the storyline of a particular film that came out a few years back. And we're very conscientious of that. And we're like, every now and again, if it gets too close to that, we're like, yeah, no, it's too much like this film, you know.
yeah.
But you can, like you said, you can take moving elements. You're right. Now everything is inspired by something else, and you can hear it, you can see it, you can feel it. Like it's there. I think that the key is to kind of take the ideas and then add your idea to it and then move forward with it, and create a new thing, you know. So if it's like being inspired by, I don't know, Edgar Wright's usage of shots, for
Mm,
example, right? Don't just copy exactly what he did in like Shaun of the Dead, but use that in a different context. So it's
yeah.
a nod to that person, but also you're doing your own thing,
Yeah.
you know?
Well, you made a really good point. We talked about thinking and feeling. AI can't think or feel. It can't see. It can't taste. It has no knowledge. It has no intelligence. So it can't make any of those judgments. Only we can make those judgments. And if someone's using it as a tool and guiding it along, yeah, I guess there's some merits, but the really it's so limited, and the stuff that people create in it is not that good. I went to an AI event that was quite interesting, and there's this guy that had created this tour that AI kind of auto creates, and it was kind of clever. Well, it was clever, but it was generating stuff. He just put in some locations that generated a tour, but the tour was it was stupidly boring.
Yeah.
It created its own images, which was kind of it gave me a thumbs up.
Yeah. Why did it give it a thumbs up?
Oh, I
What?
don't know.
That's new.
Um,
What the fuck was that?
yeah. So this thing generated it generated the questions, it generated the images, and one of the questions was wrong because it said, "Where does the Queen live?" And the Queen was dead by this point. The other thing was it generated this really bad picture of Buckingham Palace. It was just and that's just a boring question. But it was clever that it created this tool, but it just shows it can't do anything interesting. It's yeah.
I feel like I've seen a lot of people talk about this as well, like this idea, like why is it being used for creative things? Why is it not being used for the monotonous things that, to be honest, human beings are more likely to mess up? See, we're fantastic with art, creativity. It's one of the joys of being a human being as expression and art and artistry and creativity. It's what we are in everything. I challenge everyone listening right now to disagree with this. I believe everyone is creative in some shape or form. Whether you're a grand mathematician, a scientist, an actor, or you're just sitting on your couch right now and you're looking at the screen and you're like, "What are you talking about, Christian?" I'm telling you, you have creativity in you. It's there. You just if you can't see it, you haven't explored it or you haven't discovered it yet, but it's there. And when I look at AI, I'm like, well, we don't need something to help us to create. Maybe assist, sure, if it makes it a bit quicker, but ultimately you need the human at the helm of that because
Mm.
that's where the ideas come from. But human beings always fuck up when it comes to like data entry or like like this because of course you got to
Because it's
like
boring.
yeah.
And when something's boring, your brain just shuts down. And
Yeah. Well, it's you know, like you're staring at a screen for ages and it all blurs and you just like, you know, it's of course it's going to be like that, and of course you're going to make mistakes, and the brain just can't pay attention for that long.
Yeah.
I remember at uni they said to me that like it apparently it takes something like what is it? You have like 20 minutes of attention span, and after that it's all downhill. Like you just lost the room. There might be a few people you've got, but probably you haven't.
Unless you, I mean, we can watch a feature film for 3 hours or something, and it can grip us all the way through. Um,
Sure. But then you look at that as an example. We all take different things from films. So in that feature film, there's probably something that's gripping us that we're looking for. We all consume media in different
mm,
ways. You know, like for instance, I never noticed these little things that other people notice. Like, oh, did you see in the background of this shot there was this thing, and they got it on the first watch, and I'm like, what, really?
yeah,
Oh, okay,
I don't always spot that stuff either.
yeah,
But because I'm engrossed in the story, and I think story increases people's attention spans massively because that's the way we're wired. We're wired as like story creatures, if you like. And so because we are wired that way, we can watch a film for 3 hours where we can't listen to someone just give us information for 3 hours. Our eyes would glaze over. So
yeah.
yeah.
You're right. Yeah, I mean that's like every uni lecture I had. So yeah, it just I don't know. I mean, it's you got to make things short but sweet. You know, human beings. It's like when I tell stories, right? If I've really got someone and I know they're fully engrossed in what I'm talking about, I'll give them the full story with all the trimmings and everything interesting on top, and really just blow their mind with it. Hopefully. But other people, they're just, and you know, so you give them a cliff notes, which is not the same thing. But you know,
Mm,
that's you need to tell them this story for whatever reason. Maybe it's a functional purpose reason, and so you tell them. But then other people, you just don't bother. You know,
yeah.
like yeah, it's. I think it's judge your audience. I think that's always the key. Judge your audience, but at the same time, I don't think it's worth like changing what you do. I think it's just trying to cater where you can but not change it to the point where you're changing you.
Yeah.
You know?
Yeah.
In
Agree.
theory, in theory. Um, what have been some of your favorite clients to work with over the years, or who I should say?
Um, so we've not done anything in them for years and years, but there's a publisher in America called Zondervan, and we we did an adaptation of some books. So we did um a little Bible clip, and we did a little clip from a kid's book about a zoo. And so that was quite fun because it was real animation rather than corporate kind of flat graphic-y kind of stuff. It was, and the lady we were working with, she really got storytelling. So we communicate things and she'd get it. And she wasn't trying to make it more informational. So that was really fun working with her because she knew what she was doing. Um, I'm just trying to think of. I think when we've worked with bands, I mean, lots of bands are fun to work with because they they're creative people and they like mucking around. Um, I'm thinking back to a band particularly we worked with called New Cassettes, who were um, based in Northampton, and we did a lot of larking around with them, and we we did all sorts of. They were keen for us to do some fun stuff, so that was a good client. I mean, the client actually was the BBC, but we were working with them on a kind of um, like much more um, personal level. So that was fun. any client that lets you do things that are fun and do things that are um not the expected thing. Because I think you want to take the expected and do a little twist on it, because otherwise it just becomes yet another thing you're seeing. So when a client lets you do that, that's the best.
What have been perhaps some of the more challenging experiences you've had in your career?
Um, someone asked a question the other day about a client, the worst client, and it kind of fits in because there was, and so now I've recently told this, but I did a job for a call center,
Oh God.
and the call center, it was their awards video, and it we had this guy that was working between us, and there was like levels of people, and he was promising things to the client that without checking with me whether that was possible or reasonable. And it was a video for their like award ceremony, and it would have been so much better to have got that money divided by the number of people in the call center and then just given them the money, buy them a beer, buy them a coffee, whatever. They would have probably liked that a lot more. It would have given them more dignity. And but we did this job, and it ended up making a loss on it because the guy was like, look, money isn't a problem. And so I got some people in to help because the deadline was really short, and they were asking for more and more stuff that wasn't agreed at the beginning. And then the guy didn't like come through on his word, and it was just horrible. And it was the aesthetic wasn't nice. It was yeah, bad on a lot of levels. And the guy that he was working for, um, who I had no problem with, I feel like we didn't do anything again with him, and I'm sure
Hmm.
that it was because of the relationships that were frayed as a result of this ridiculous scenario. But
Crazy, isn't it? How you go into these situations with like such high hopes,
and
and you can just be so let down.
and the guy kept accusing me of lying at various points, and I'm like, I've got loads of character flaws, but I'm not a liar.
What was the final? Oh, you got to tell me more about the final product. Like, okay, so it's an animation for like an awards type deal that they're doing,
Yeah.
and
So it's like
then
fastest to pick up the phone, all this kind of I can't
okay,
remember what they wear there. And there's like and it's all glitzy, and I don't like a glitzy aesthetic. I always find that a bit
yeah,
ugh. But yeah, so it was these little clips that
jeez.
yeah. So they didn't have a presenter. It was like the video was the presenter, and then it was all these kind of
Oh, oh no, oh, like an avatar that's like, hi guys,
it
and welcome to the 20th,
yeah,
24th
it wasn't even that.
awards.
It was I can't even remember so long ago now, but I remember just and because I was so busy, I actually lost a decent job in that process because I was so busy I couldn't take the other job. So I made a loss on it. I lost a job through it. I lost um well, I probably lost the relationship with the client that this guy was the in-between guy.
Yeah.
And and it was absolutely painful, the whole process. And my computer was going wrong, which was not anyone's fault. But yeah, the whole thing was a mess.
One thing I'm learning, like with regards to that point, is this idea that you got to kind of pick and choose the stuff that's right for you, and sometimes that will come by making just a huge error of judgment. You know, shouldn't have worked with this person, but then no one ever frames it like. Uh, deliberately badly in the beginning. Like it's
Yeah.
always they frame it in the right way, and you're like, oh, this sounds good, this sounds exciting. And it's only when you get like a week or two in, you're like, oh
And
no, but then
the
you're
thing
locked
is, you
in.
need the money.
Yeah,
And so you need the money. There's nothing immoral about it. And the guy who was like we were working for, but not the middleman, I'd done stuff before with, and he was a good guy to work with, very straightforward, honest guy. So I assumed that it would be, and he said, "Oh, there's this guy that's going to produce," and I was like, "Oh, great!" And um, yeah,
Yeah. Yeah, I've got something like that in my life at the moment. I won't give too many details, but it's like a friend of mine kind of warned me about it, and they were like, "Just be careful with this thing." And I was looking at it like, okay, I'm gonna use my own judgment, but it's interesting that this person is saying this. Like, I'm like proceeding with caution, and now
mm.
I'm adjusting my response. Now I'm like, okay, I need to prioritize this and maybe less of this. And not to say I'm going to ignore this thing, but maybe it's not my main focus.
And the problem is, most of our world, we don't really use contracts. Like, there's not enough money. You can't employ like legal people, so we do everything based upon goodwill,
Mm.
and for the most part, that works actually quite well. I mean, certainly in Britain, the way that creative industries work is no one gets very much money, but it's all kind of people are pretty straightforward most of the time and um, generally honest. And but then you get a few, and then you're like, yeah, this is why contracts are used in normal industries.
Yeah, I mean, you're right. Like I do a lot of stuff, as you say, on Goodwill, like working with people because I want to work with them, and but there will always be like something that you gain from it.
Mm,
Like as much as I love working with my friends who are brilliant, like the reality is I'm also getting experience of acting, filmmaking, other opportunities. I'm also getting content footage that I can use to help me get other work, hopefully paid work. I mean, that's the mindset. Sometimes you do things purely passion and it's just for fun because you love the
mm,
process, you love the people, whatever, 100%. But especially, I don't know, like when I look at my career, what I'm trying to do, I'm trying to make something happen. So I really do tend to try to prioritize things that will either immediately get me some money or that will help me in the long term. Like I won't just do
yeah.
things for money just because like, because there's plenty of ways to make money. But at the same time, really you want to be earning for what you're doing. In the very beginning, it's like just get any and all experience. But when I look at what I'm doing now, it's like, okay, I've got experience under my belt. I've got like, say, a show reel, photos, this, that, and the other. Now I need to just kind of work more on my pitch and trying to get business coming, get
Mm,
paid.
yeah.
It's hard.
There's too much of the free economy, and I don't think that's good at
Yeah.
all. Yeah, I don't think that's healthy.
I think one thing I think's pretty interesting that I'm trying to push is this idea of like trading more. So like, okay, maybe I don't have the money, but maybe I could offer you something in return.
Mm,
Like I was talking to, I'm about to record a record, no, a couple of records with the sound engineer who's a friend of mine, and I'm looking at it. I'm like, because the initial stuff will be free, and I'm looking at, I know how much time and effort goes into that. I know and I'm looking at it. I'm like, this has to be fair for him. So I'm
mm,
looking at what I do, and I'm like, well, I can definitely promote him across my social media, podcast, you name it. Yeah, maybe he could even be a guest on the show sometime. I don't know. I'll see. There's different avenues. There's different things
mm,
there. That's number one. Number two, I thought about doing like a behind the scenes style doc of the filming process. I was like, that's another way you can do that because that shows him in the action, but it also promotes me as well. And it's stuff I can use, etc. And then the other part of it is agreeing what would be fair just as a base rate and looking at other things you could do. Like, like it's if you the money's not there, then what's the favor that could be owed? Like how could you help that person? I always try
mm.
to look at that. Like, for instance, I pitched other times like, oh, I could do this voiceover for you as payment for this. Or like, you know what I mean? Like
Yeah,
maybe it doesn't always equate to being equal, but I try to like always make it fair. And I think especially if you're working with friends, I think it's important. It's easy to be like, oh yeah, can't you do it to me for free? No, like pay your friends, support their businesses.
yeah.
It's important.
a friend of mine said, um, he said we do mates rates are the wrong way around. So actually, surely you'd want to pay your mates better than you would want to pay
Yeah.
someone that's not your mate. And
Yeah, no,
it's like,
I
that's
agree
really
completely.
interesting. Um,
Well, I think the classic thing is like, oh, well, I know you, can't you give me a discount? And it's like, well, sure, but then let's look at that for a second. If I'm trying to set up a business and I'm cutting you a discount, I'm losing money and time on
hmm,
that. And I'm trying to set this thing up. Now, if I'm already successful, then that's a bit different. But then still, I wouldn't want to be taken advantage of either. Do you know what I mean? Like, I wouldn't want someone to just constantly be like, oh, can you give me this? Can you give me this? Can you give me this? Because, we're friends. And it's like, are we, or am I just an ATM for you?
but I guess where it is different is you don't have when you do things with friends, you often don't need you can cut out a lot of the faff,
Yes.
and so you effectively can do something cheaper. Um, because you're like, okay, you know me, you know what I'm up to. You can pop around and have a quick look where I wouldn't do that maybe with a client because it'd have to become a proper meeting. All of that means that you can do things probably a bit cheaper, but not a lot.
No, it's a solid point. I never really thought about it like that. There is a lot of stuff you can avoid, which makes it easier. Um, I don't know. It's interesting. I'm still learning as I go right now with regards to like approaching that, like the difference between professionalism versus just friendship, and know where to draw the line. If you're going into business with friends, I think it's important you still enter in with some degree of professionalism.
Yeah,
It can't just be a
yeah,
free for all kind of laughing situation. Like, you still got to do business.
yeah.
So there it is. What would you say are the qualities of high quality animation, or what do you look for in trying to create a good product?
So top of the tree is animation is story. The
Yeah.
top of the tree of an animation is an animation. The top of the tree is storytelling. So you can have some ropey animation with a beautiful, well-told story and it be kind of watchable. But if you have beautiful animation and the story's terrible, then it's not really very watchable. So I'd put story at the top, but then the actual art and craft of animation. So it it should move well. You want to have emotion, right? You want to connect with the character, and so it should be you see the character and you laugh when they laugh, you cry when they cry, and in animation you'd call it acting, but it's acting. People tend to think of the person who's doing the voice or whatever, but actually it's the acting of the animator who's breathing life into the character.
Mhm.
Um, so I'd put that next, then the actual making sure the physics of it and all of that looks good. The voiceover, the sound, that's really important. I mean, sound is probably about 50% of the animation. Um, um, that it's just the design, the look. I don't know. I feel like I'm rambling.
No, not at all. I mean, it's interesting to get your perspective on it. I mean, this is a world that I know very little about. Whole point of this show is for me to kind of get a window look into someone's livelihood or their life or what they're passionate about or whatever, and it's like, for instance, like when you said there about how an animator is breathing life into a character, like I never really thought about that element to it. Because it is like if you look at a character like that's very expression based, like okay, like your classic Looney Tunes, something like that.
Mm,
Like, yeah, it's over the top, but so much of the character is those mannerisms and movements, and it's not just the voice. It's like when you think like Bugs Bunny, yeah, it's an iconic voice, but you also think about like that weird stiff movement he used to do.
yeah,
He's like like that, or
yeah.
when
It's
he's
like
like Yeah, or when he's like silently eating a carrot and just like looking like staring in a kind of like glazed look, like it's almost like sarcastic, but it's just an
Mm.
expression. Like I never thought about that. It's amazing.
And you see a really great animators sitting in front of a mirror doing like what is- or whatever. They are acting. They're they're acting in front of the mirror and then translating their acting to the animation.
Interesting. Okay.
I wish
What?
I was a lot better at
Well,
that.
acting.
Yeah, well, acting as in the acting and on as an animator acting. Yeah, it's the people who are really good at it. It's just amazing.
I'm intrigued, like how that works as far as like how you capture that. Is it like mocap? Is that what you mean, or just
No, no, it's literally you sit in front of a mirror, or I'll often not use a mirror but use my camera on my
okay?
computer just because I can flick it around and just um but I yeah, so I'm if I've got a character he's just like suddenly getting angry, I'll be like going or whatever.
Yeah.
And then I'd be like, what's the and trying to capture those facial features.
So you're using the human face as kind of like a base template for that character, essentially.
Yeah, so I mean it's funny because I was doing something a while back and a friend was in the room while I was doing it and they were just taking the mickey out of me because I kept saying the line over and over again and kind of saying the line and doing like a weird face and then it's like because you're not just looking you're going okay my head when I do that it kind of moves on an arc it's there's a flow to it and so you want to capture that flow even if you're it's much simpler than my face with all its wrinkles and but you go well what's the key thing that will help communicate that expression or that feeling what do I do I move forward do I move back do I move to the side what do my eyebrows do what all of those questions you go through and you're your
Yeah.
best reference
No,
because
that's a
you can
really
see
good
yourself.
point, actually. When I think about like, especially like more modern animation, the characters obviously do have expressions and stuff, but a lot of the time it is, as you say, like more based on their movement. Like, I'm thinking of like Family Guy, for instance. Like their faces basically just never change. Like for the most part, you think like Peter Griffin, like every now and again he might have a wacky face, but mostly it's just the same face. So then his movements are then the important aspect of that.
Yeah, and I think that's a budgetary thing because it should be both together, but it's pretty simple character and it's not the most subtle form of animation, which is I don't mean that critically. I it's just it's the genre. So yeah, you
Interesting.
watch some of the great like the classic Disney films
Hmm.
or just the subtlety of animation in the characters' faces is quite something. It's the Warner stuff though that I prefer. It's just the crazier stuff. And you mentioned Bugs Bunny. The subtlety of his character is actually very, very interesting.
Yeah. I was always fascinated by that, especially like how ahead of its time it was. Like Bugs Bunny as a character always felt very, as I said, sarcastic, kind of, I don't know, like
He's a wise guy,
dry.
isn't he?
Yeah, dry humor, like very it's quite adult for a cartoon, to be honest.
But
Like a lot of the
they were
humor.
for adults, so they used to go on before the film. So they were they weren't created for TV. They were created as the movie to play before the big feature. And so you'd watch a Warner Brothers cartoon and then a Warner Brothers film.
Mhm.
And so and they had all these pop culture references in them to stuff of that time, which is really fun because we don't necessarily pick up on them all now, but you'll see some of the characters from classic Hollywood films of that era, and you're like, yeah, um,
I
yeah,
love
they're
that.
brilliant.
I love that as well. Like just on a side note, when you're going back and watching something and trying to remember the references and why, like sometimes you're just too young to know what the hell they're talking about. Do you know, like I really like the Young Ones, the television show,
Mm.
and I love all that era of comedy. But I didn't grow up in the '80s, so when I hear some of the references, I'm like, I don't know what they're talking about. I have no idea why that's funny, and it sucks, but at the same time, it's kind of intriguing because it's like forever lost in its era, which is kind of bittersweet in a way.
I guess that's why we always have to create new things. That
Yeah.
creativity has to keep going. We can't just have beautiful things that are from the past. They will always inspire us, but we've got to keep moving forward and create things for our time.
Never thought about it like that. That's You really got me thinking, man. Appreciate it. This is fascinating. What has animation taught you about life?
What has animation taught me about life? Oh, I don't know. I think the process of doing animation teaches you to observe. So I think, I mean, actually just the simple act of drawing forces you to look because you can see the world around you. You can see a tree a million times, but if you stop and you draw that tree, you then understand that tree in a way you never did before. You see that tree, you see each element of it because you've had to look and you've got to think. And I think the process of doing animation makes you look at people's facial expressions. It makes you look at the world around you. It forces you to observe. And same with acting, right? You are forced to observe how do you act? What do you do when you're upset? What do you do when you're happy? And so I think you learn those things. It probably makes you more aware. Um,
Yeah. Yeah, no, you're right. Like I've been reading into like realism in acting lately, and I do a lot more people watching now, and I watch for the subtleties and focus like because so much like for example, okay, I was sending over some voice thing for a project today or yesterday, sorry, and they had a mock up of what the original scene was. And I was, they're students. I can tell it's a budget, and that's fine. Sometimes you find some amazing people, but sometimes you get people, and maybe their acting isn't all that great. It is what it is. But I was looking at that, and I was like, okay, why is the acting not good though?
mm,
And it's like, well, because I don't buy it. This is not real. And
mm,
then people go, well, no, it's not supposed to be real. It's supposed to be dramatic. And it's like, yeah, but there's a difference. You can be dramatic and still be real.
yeah.
But we're drawn by realism. We're drawn into things. Authenticity is quite popular, And I think with acting, you've got to look more at natural. What is the natural reaction to this information? And also how much you understand your character. So, like, not how you would react to this situation, but how would your character react to this situation?
Yes. Yeah, I think you're absolutely right. And yeah, I was just thinking how you've got some people are very subtle with their expressions, and some people are just over the top. And then you've got the difference between theatre where
Mm,
you've got bigger movements because you've got to be able to see them in the back row, and film where you can zoom right into someone's eyebrow. Like there's a there's going to be a difference in how you act, and you're going to go more naturalistic where you can go close up. Um, And it's also a comic actor. Someone like Charlie Chaplin, he he played for laughs, and so he's really well observed. So it's exaggerated, but it's well observed exaggeration. It's not just I'm going to just do crazy stuff.
Hmm.
You get it with Jim Carrey as well. He pushes to these very extreme kind of over the top characters, but they are based on an exaggerated form of reality. They're not just I'm going to just stretch my face into a random shape.
Yeah, and I don't. When I watch his stuff, particularly like the classic films he did, like if you think like The Mask, Ace Ventura, characters like that, like a lot of it is based in things you can relate to, like sarcasm. Like his characters are deliberately over the top because they're kind of making a mockery of people and their reactions to situations. Like
Mm,
he really nails this in Ace Ventura, I feel. Like
mm,
the whole point is he's trying to kind of expose his frustration with these cops and their kind of like laziness and their bad attitudes. And it's like he might be unorthodox, he might be annoying, but you know what, he's getting results and these cops aren't, and they can
mm.
laugh at him all they want, but you know, who's the one solving the crime? You know? And it's like that's a good kind of lesson for life. Do you know what I mean? Like there's life lessons in there.
Mm.
I thought it was. I think, for instance, Liar Liar is a beautiful film. Just in general, just the storyline, the theme of it, and everything. Um, but a lot of the time when he's like losing, absolutely fucking losing it in the courthouse and pulling faces and stuff, like he's a man who's been pushed to his limit. You know what I mean? If you really
Mm.
you want to analyze it, like this man just wants to see his son. You know, he doesn't want to be at work all the time, you know, but he is a fantastic lawyer. He knows how to do it, but he's surrounded by the wrong people. You know, he's not got the right people and he's not got his priorities straight. And when he finally does get them all together, things start going better for him. But it's a journey to get to that point. But his frustration is exhibited well in those overreactions, in that kind of over the top, you know. And yeah, it's done for the viewer and it's done for the film and it's done for comedy because it's a comedy film, but at the same time, like I think it's done for the purpose of trying to educate.
Yeah. Story takes you on a journey, and you, as a character is pushed to the extremes, there's more liberty for the actor to use exaggeration than when they're kind of fine and they're not pushed to the extremes. So it's about range.
Absolutely. A couple of final questions for you just to kind of wrap things up for today. What advice could you give to aspiring directors and animators specifically?
Um, so this is advice coming from someone that's aspiring themselves in a lot of ways. And I think that that is maybe my first point of advice is people who I've met who are further up than I am are always learning. They're always aspiring. They're not actually resting on their laurels. So that would be the first thing is you're always going to be aspiring. I'm always aspiring. I'm hardly there. Um, what what other bits of advice? Um, keep using everything as a learning opportunity. So every project, even if it's a project that's boring or a project that is not really the thing you want to do, put your all into it, and who knows where it could lead. Just do good jobs. Um, yeah, maybe not the most profound wisdom, but
No, it's solid, man. Especially, I think trying to get something from a situation that seemingly doesn't have a lot to offer or is, as you say, like boring. Like I think there's a lot when I do hospitality work, but then I try to look at it in different lenses. Like I try to look at it like I'm an actor. This is acting. I'm not this person. I'm playing a part. I'm playing a role. We're playing roles all the time. I can play this role really well. I can do this role really well. It's not
Mm,
my livelihood. It's not my life, but it's you get. I mean, you can choose to get the most out of it, learn from it, grow from it, or you can choose to complain about it and be miserable and live in that. It always comes down to a choice. Life is
mm,
always going to throw us situations we don't want to be in, challenges. It's going to force us to be uncomfortable, but I think that's important because that almost pushes us to get the best out of ourselves.
mm,
The amount of times I've been in a situation where I feel trapped, I feel stressed, I feel everything's against me, and then somehow I get through it. And a lot of the time it comes from like taking that next step and going like, okay, fuck it, I'm gonna do this. And then that fuck it is you evolving.
yeah,
Maybe.
yeah. I mean, I had a situation a couple of days ago, this project I'm kind of trying to launch, and in the same day, I had, and within an hour, I'd had about four major setbacks, two particular major setbacks, and I was like, oh, okay, I need to just stop. I need to rethink what I'm doing, and you've got to go through that. I mean, it's that's why stories work, right? It's that point in the story. If you've watched enough stories, you know where that is in the story, and it's if you don't push through, if you don't go right, now I've got to re-strategize. Now I've got to go in a different direction or push through this or whatever you do, you've got to go through that, and that's the case every time.
What's the best advice you've ever received?
I don't know. Oh, I don't know. Best advice I've ever received.
I love these questions, especially when someone doesn't have something straight away, because it's like you're going back throughout your entire life, thinking about the conversations you've had, things that have hit you, different experiences, and it really gets you kind of like just for that one moment, reflecting on your life. And then that's a beautiful thing. I'll feel the air right now. Like I've had a lot of people give me advice over the years. Sometimes it sticks, sometimes it doesn't. But what I find is it's like whatever resonates with you a lot of the time is the advice that you retain. And sometimes stuff that you get told doesn't resonate until years later,
Mm,
you know?
yeah.
It's interesting. We'll move to the next question.
Okay. Something might occur to me later.
That's okay. That's all right. Those questions, it's never like I'm trying to catch someone out. It's like I ask every guest that I have done for years at this point. Um, I think a lot of people like when they get asked that question, they're expected, maybe they feel like, oh, I need to say something really big and profound and meaningful. And it's like, no, it's just what means something to you, you
Mm,
know? Like my next question will reflect that a bit better because the whole point of it is best advice you've ever received is like, you know, something that someone told you or that you saw somewhere and it stuck with you and you move forward or you live by it or whatever. The next question I'm going to ask is more about someone's journey, their individual journey and what they've learned from it. So I ask you, John, what's the biggest life lesson you've learned so far?
biggest life lesson I've learned so far.
This one's easier to answer, I think, because it's personal. All right, let me frame it a different way.
Okay.
When you look throughout your life, throughout all
Hmm.
the years, all the experiences you've had, what's the one thing that stands out above all else?
All the experiences, what stands out?
What do you live by?
What do I
Live by?
live by? As in guiding philosophy or what?
Just you,
Or something
jo-
like,
John Lumgair. Like, what's the lesson for you? I feel so bad.
no, no, no. I'm not.
I'm like really pushing you with
No, you
this.
can push me as much as you like. I'm not. What? Uh, don't worry. I'm just trying to. Yeah, it's interesting how hard it is to answer, and that is
Oh,
maybe
100%.
telling.
No,
Um,
I've been some people whose shows I've been on. They flipped the script and asked me those questions, and I knew it was going to come one day, and I struggled. One time I was prepared and I wrote them down. Another time I wasn't. I was like, fuck. What I always go with was what I think in the moment. It's not necessarily like,
yeah, well, that's the thing, isn't it? When you say your whole life, you're just like, oh, and I haven't had a life that has had these major ups or downs.
okay,
I've I've been relatively steady. I've never had any great riches. I've never had anything that's been so remarkable that it's been that people will be talking about so far for years to come. Like none of that's happened. Um, the most important things have generally been the small, and this is maybe linked to the advice thing, that the small, the local, the relational
mm,
are the most important things. And we often, so often, people talk about big, grand things, and actually, how you treat people in the day to day is much more significant. And the people that have had the biggest impact on me are those that I've met, and they're not super famous people, they're parents, they're friends. That it's, I guess it's the ordinary is actually a lot more extraordinary than people give credit for. And it comes back to the doing things well and the things you're doing. I think it's that you are living living your life in doing those ordinary things well and caring about people well. There's a whole series of police cars just
I was
uh,
watching it's like a speech by what's his name? He played Gandalf, Sir Ian McKellen.
yeah.
And one of the things he said that stood out to me was he said, chase these things for no other reason other than for a sense of becoming, to be.
Mm,
Sometimes when I get bogged down about, my podcast not maybe getting the views I want, or not having the money to do things the way I want, or acting not taking off, music not taking off, a lot of the time my frustration is just because I don't want to be working in a job I hate anymore. I want my life to look different. I want it to not be such a struggle, and to also just do what I love and only do what I love.
yeah.
But I do recognize that a lot of it comes from that feeling of like, oh, I'm not successful unless I've achieved this. I'm not successful unless this, and life isn't good unless it's this. And it's like, that's not true. As you said, so much of life is the day to day, the little things, the things that you take for granted or that you don't think are that important. Maybe they are the most important things. Because when you really think about it, that's what you're left with. In your life, there might be spectacular moments. When you look back, you might reflect on those moments and go, that was a really, really special time in my life.
Mm.
But I'd wager what you'd really, really care about would be the people whose lives you touched and whose lives touched you, and, you know, who had a profound impact on you in some way. You know, when I think back to people I've loved and lost over the years, for instance, I think about the way they made me feel, the essence of them, who they were, who they are. And in everything that I do creatively, I try to really put myself into it, mind, body, and soul. And I try to kind of make that the focus. And I'm trying more and more to just let it go as well. You know, you spoke before about like, oh, I've never really achieved anything big. Da, 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 da. Well, I mean, you do what you love. Do you know what I mean? You do it for a living. You do what you love. You've created a career off of it. You're doing something that you were fascinated by as a child.
Mm.
You've made your childhood dream come true. That is success. That is, I mean, however you want to look at it. I know the world often says success is money and numbers and status, but to be honest, I really do think that those things are pretty meaningless in the grand scheme of things.
That means, well, that it's weird because that means to an end. So why would I want money or status? The only reason I would want money or status is so that I can be free to do the projects I want to do rather
Sure.
than having to do things for others. Um, so that and money and status gives you that,
Mm,
but in them they're only means to an end. And I think the problem is people make them the end. And if you make them the end, they're rubbish.
I could not agree more with you, man. Like 100%. I'm right there with you. Like what I care about most is just being able to live a life of creativity, live off of that, and same as you, have the freedom to do the passion projects that I want to do rather than having to do stuff that isn't fun. I
Yeah.
mean, it all comes down to that sense of childhood wonder of like, I want to do this. This is fun. Well, that sounds fun. Or, you know what I mean? Like, I've turned down
Mm,
projects before where, and it might have even been paid, but it's like the idea of it just sucks. Like, you know, what they're proposing, like in some way, just doesn't sound fun. And I think
yeah.
that's the key, you know.
Yeah. Or things that I think are just putting bad things out into the world. So I remember turning down a
Mm,
video that was promoting gambling. I just think gambling is bad for people. Like it really has. You see people, you see the poor guys outside the betting shop, and you
yeah,
just think, yeah, I don't want to contribute to that. I'd like to see those guys thrive. I don't want to see. So it's yeah, and maybe I could have made money and then used the money to get more status and all of those things, but to what end? I just made the world a worse place.
I agree. I try to do the same thing with everything I do. I think about that, like the impact your actions, your words, the things you put out into the world have, the example you set. I think about that a lot. Like, what is the example I'm setting for those around me, for those who look up to me?
Mm,
You know, there's only a few, but they are there. And I look at that and I take that very seriously. And I think there's something to be said for that. So I guess the lesson there is be better, do better, people. Just go out there and try to contribute something positive to the world. Doesn't have to be spectacular. Could just be helping people out, giving them your time, you know, stuff like that. But goes a long way. As we tie everything up for today's show, do you have any upcoming projects or final thoughts that you'd like to share with our listeners?
um, yeah, so upcoming project is a project called Jazz Cow, which is about a jazz playing
Yes.
cow. And he leads a resistance movement to big tech. So he's against all the algorithms and he's
He's my hero.
yeah, this he's like disconnect and reconnect with like real life. And So he fights the algorithms using jazz.
Amazing.
So him and his misfit friends of artists and creatives are all just trying to live their lives, but this tech world is just encroaching on them. So they're pushing back, and so we're trying to raise money for a pilot on Kickstarter for which is going to be a heist where he's trying to get his sax back from Dr. Pop, who's the guy who's creating all the tech that he's in resistance to. So that's going on Kickstarter soon. I think I'm shifting the launch date. So you're getting the exclusive on that because it was kind of semi-decided yesterday. We haven't quite totally nailed down the new date, but it's going to get pushed back because I had a number of setbacks this week. So you go through your setbacks and you get up and you've got to keep going.
Absolutely.
But you can see updates at jazzcow.co.uk.
Awesome.
So yeah, that's the project. That's the thing and you're talking about timescales and stuff, and that was an idea that's 20 years ago. It's been various iterations, stuck in a drawer for years, coming out of a drawer, and so that's one thing I'd say is stuff takes a long time to happen sometimes, and you fail at stuff, and you've got to get up and keep going. So yeah, and I would have failed probably had I just launched it when I'm planning to launch it. So that's probably why it's all part of a wider story that we're in.
Going to put it better myself. Thank you so much, man. I wish
Thank
you the
you.
best of it. I can't wait to see Jazz Cow come out. That's going to be awesome. And yeah, just thank you very much for your wisdom and your time, man. Really appreciate it.
Oh, it's a pleasure.
Getting all sentimental, but like shows like this are why I do this show, and why I've done it for so long, and why I don't give up, because it's inspirational, to be honest. Keeps you going, keeps you motivated to keep trying. So I will keep trying. Thank you, John, for your wisdom.
Oh, it's a pleasure. And if I ever get any status, then get me back on again, and you can use my status to grow your numbers.
Like I said before, man, the most valuable thing is the conversation and the wisdom, and we've certainly had that here. And I know my listeners will get a lot from this episode. And I learned so much about animation that I just never knew. So thank you, man. That's really
It's a pleasure.
But yeah, thank you so much for appearing on the show, and I wish you the very best of luck. And to all the listeners of the Christian Reeve podcast, you know what's coming next. I haven't seen it, so I'm going to bug you until you do it. Please, if you enjoyed the show, leave a review on Podchaser, or if you listened on Spotify, Apple Podcasts, please leave a review and a rating. Share it with your friends. In this show today, we spoke about the importance of word of mouth. Well, your words will help this show. So please, if you have any and all opinions, if you think it's good, if you think it sucked, please tell me and tell me why. It's really important. If you were watching the show on YouTube, please like, share, and subscribe. Share it with your friends. It would really, really, really help us out. If you want to support me and what I'm doing and give me a chance of maybe making this show bigger and better, and just in general, please subscribe to me on Patreon, patreon.com/Christian Reeve. Get yourself access to bonus content, monthly shows, and much more. And most importantly, thank you so much for listening, for watching. And until next time, I'll see you in the next one.